What's up? What's up? What's up? Glad you're here. Thank you very much for joining in once again. In today's session, we're going to discuss virtual machine migration. It's a highly requested, I would say, session. And it has got a connection starting from Unit 1 to Unit 5. So in all aspects of cloud computing, we're going to need virtual machine migration, this concept. Specifically, if at all we are looking for some specific topic like platform as a service or infrastructure as a service, or for a matter of fact, software as a service, then virtual machine migration is once again very, very, very important. Okay, so let us get it started. We're going to see what is virtual machine migration and what is the difference between virtual machine migration and live virtual machine migration. So let us get started. So this video going to be once again very short, very, very specific. We're going to only discuss whatever we need here. So let us get started, assuming that I do have one hardware, and on top of that hardware, I do have 4 virtual machines. And obviously, at the background, what I'm assuming that I do have one CPU, which is a 8-core processor. I do have 8 gigs of RAM. I do have 1 terabyte of storage. And eventually, I do have 200 Mbps of network speed. So that is my core underlying infrastructure. On top of that, what we did, we have created 4 virtual machines. So I'll be naming them V1, V2, V3, and V4. Now, in the initial configuration, all these virtual machine, they do have their specific kind of a requirement, and they are running specific kind of application. So if I am assuming that I have one application called A1, which is right now running in V1. Similarly, I may have one more application which is called A2, which is also running in 2 virtual machines, V2 and V3. So it is quite possible that one application is running on one virtual machine. It is also quite possible that one application or one service is running on more than one virtual machine. So that is quite possible. Now, you might ask one question that this particular one is one instance, what we call a hardware configurations in cloud computing, that is I1. Now, these 2 virtual machines, they can belong to same infrastructure or same instance, or they can also belong to 2 different instances. So this is also this requirement, this scenario is also quite possible. However, now what we are going to look at it, if at all for this application A1, which is right now allocated to virtual machine V1 with an underlying configurations of 2 core of processors, and I do have 4 gigs of RAM, and subsequently I do have 500 gigs of storage allocated to that. And assuming that this kind of infrastructure, whatever we have right now, this infrastructure can go ahead and handle 500 client requests. Right. Now down the line, it is quite possible that this number 500 can go up to 50,000, or this number can also go and cater to some number as 5. So as we know, in cloud computing, we do have a concept called auto scale up. When from 500, the number of client requests starts going to 50,000, the infrastructure will increase. And if at all from 500, the number of client requests are going to 5, the infrastructure will automatically decrease. And we will be paying as per our usage, very, very specifically. So here I'll be paying high for a higher infrastructure. And when it is being decreased, I'll be paying low for this lower infrastructure. Now, given this fact that if at all for 50,000 client requests, the new infrastructure what I'll be requiring are 8 gigs of 8-core processor, 16 gigs of RAM, and 4 terabyte of storage with, say, for example, 150 Mbps of network configuration, then it is quite natural to understand that the underlying total infrastructure, which is denoted as I now, will not be sufficient for us. So what are you going to do now? We're going to go ahead and do a migration for this. So what I have to do, I'll be able to find out one more infrastructure which is having similar kind of configuration, but in a higher end, maybe in a new instance, which I'll be naming at I2. In this physical hardware, I do have 4 CPUs, and each and every CPU is configured with 16 core, and I do have 256 gigs of RAM, which is possible for a cloud server. Nothing to get surprised about it. I do have 10 terabyte of storage, and the network configuration is also very, very high, say 1000 Mbps. Technically, it's not 1 Gbps, but okay. We can assume for a matter of fact that that is 1 Gbps. We have to have 1024 Mbps to become 1 Gbps, but let us consider 1 Gbps for that. So now what's going to happen is, this particular virtual machine at the background, it's connected to the hard drive, it's connected to certain RAM portion of the memory and everything. Now what's going to happen, when I get to see this kind of infrastructure is happening, what cloud service providers, or the matter of fact VMM, virtual machine manager, will identify the need for upgrading the configuration for this virtual machine. So what it will do, it will take this virtual machine V1 from here, and it will allocate to a new infrastructure where it's supposed to go ahead and allocate. Now, at this particular point of time, we get to see 2 problems. Number 1, the first problem is so this process is nothing but the migration process. Okay. So from one source, this is my source, I get it transferred to my destination. So this movement is called the virtual machine migration. Now I get to see there are 2 problems which are going to happen here. The first problem is, during migration, should I run both VMs? If at all I get to run both the virtual machines, then for that particular point of time, I'm using the infrastructure at the source and I'm using the infrastructure at the destination. So in fact, I'm using right now 2 core plus 8 core, that is 10 core, 4 GB plus 16 GB, that is 20 GB, and 500 GB plus 4 TB, that is 4.5 TB amount of hardware. Now, if at all client is not going to pay, then who is going to pay for that? And if at all as a data center owner, I am paying for it, then that means obviously I'm compromising my business here. At the second situation, if at all I say, during the virtual machine migration, once again, during the VM migration, if only one VM is running, obviously I'll be running the VM which is at the destination. But that means during this migration process, definitely for copying the data from source to the destination, there will be some milliseconds of time. Or if at all I'm running a very huge application, it might take a couple of minutes also. So during that time, none of my customers will be able to access the application, which is application A1, which is running on the virtual machine V1. So then how are we gonna address this problem? Now, during certain situations, it has been assumed that there are 2 types of migrations are possible. One is live migration, and the second situation is called non-live migration. What is the difference? Let us talk about the non-live migration first. During non-live migration, what happens? I have my first instance, which is my I1, and then I have my second instance, which is my I2, the physical server. The I1 is my source and I2 is my destination. So now when from I1, I'm shifting my virtual machine V1 to the second instance I2. During that point of time, I will be shutting down the virtual machine at the source after the migration is completed. Technically speaking, once the virtual machine data has been copied to I2, I will be starting the V1. During that point of time, there will be shutdown. Now, if at all I say I will be shutting this application for 10 seconds, till that time the complete copying process will be completed. This 10 seconds should be part of my service level agreement. You are able to make the connections here, guys. How SLA will be playing a role here. During my SLA, if at all I am not allowing live migration, I will say during the SLA formation or SLA discussion that for 10 seconds, the service or the application will be stopped. So if at all that is agreed by the customer, I can have the shutdown process here and I can migrate, and once again I can have a start. That is all fine. So this is nothing but, this scenario is nothing but the second scenario, what we call non-live migration. Now let us talk about the live migration process and let us see how that actually works out for us. Once again, assuming that I do have the first instance, which is my source, and then in that I have configured my first virtual machine V1. During that time, initially, that is connected to one of the hardware, and some part of the RAM is also allocated for that. Similarly, when I'm trying to migrate this same virtual machine to a second instance, which is my destination, initially I'll be copying the complete virtual machine to the first one. To the second one, to my destination. Once the copying is over, at this point of time, both the virtual machines are running. But here, whatever hard drive I do have or whatever RAM I do have, I will give the connection from this virtual machines to this hardware. But this hardware right now do not contain the data what the first virtual machine was having in the first instance. So that time what's going to happen is this first virtual machine will have live access to the old infrastructure. And during that time, what happens? Whatever the client request comes, the client request will be handled by the second copy of the virtual machine, where the data will be fetched from the first set of infrastructure. And slowly, the complete set of data will be copied from the first infrastructure to second infrastructure. Once the copying process is over, then only the first virtual machine will be kept on shutdown. So that is gonna happen. So as you can see, this is the first situation. And during this situation, for zero amount of time, the virtual machine is shut down. So this is kind of a situation where we can go ahead and assume some application which are very, very mission critical, and I cannot afford to shut it down, right? So this is what the second situation happens. So today we're gonna get to see what is a virtual machine migration, and we also get to see there are two kind of process where I can call it a live migration and a non-live migration. All right, so that is gonna be it about this, and go ahead and check the old videos where we're gonna have a small talks on cloud computing. I'm calling this series Cloud Computing Small Talks. You're gonna have the link to the old videos on the screen as this video completes. That's it, guys. So stay happy, stay safe, keep learning. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much.